Oh wow,
Man, I think if you
I'm not ready for this.
make something that looks nice and you feel like professional, then like fake it till you make it kind of
Yeah,
thing.
100%. That's
It-
been my whole career.
why do you say that? Why do
um,
you reckon that is?
I don't know. I think I just suffer majorly with imposter syndrome.
How
So
so?
I think as like a kid, I almost was too much into sport, so it's almost become a detriment that I put people on a pedestal above me, if that makes sense. So like I grew up racing motocross, so I'd always uh I guess look up to people like Chad Reed and that, and now I obviously still follow motocross, but I think it's just I've always put people on a pedestal above me, and growing up probably just never thought that I would be what they are. And then I think it's just kind of carried throughout my career. So I've always kind of had that little bit of imposter syndrome, or never felt like I deserve what other people have.
Do you feel like you've gotten better at feeling like you should be a part of this, or do you still think that lingers around?
Um, it definitely still lingers in areas, but I'm definitely getting better at it. Like the more I've moved into the coaching space and stuff, and helped the riders under me and stuff get results and that, uh, I think that's definitely helped get rid of it, because I've watched what I can help them achieve as well, and I've got like the proof behind me that at some point I know what I'm talking about.
How funny is that though, that you will put so much belief into someone else that you're coaching and you'll see a future for them and you know how far they can take this. But when you look at yourself, you go, oh, I can never be that good. I can never do that. I'm never going to be a Chad Reed or a Sam Hill or whoever that person is that you idolize. But why do we think that when you obviously need to believe it?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's probably just as athletes, we're all, obviously you would know, we're very hard on ourselves. So it's very easy to pick apart yourself because you see every second of your own life. Whereas when you look to people like Sam Hill, Chad Reed, or like in my sport, Yoris.a, Sam Willoughby, people like that, you don't actually see, I guess, the bad points of their life. So you just see the highlights that you see on social media and stuff these days, and then compare to them. And then when you go to sleep at night knowing you've had a bad day or a bad training session, then I guess it's, you know exactly what you're dealing with, but you've got no idea what they're dealing with. So
If you don't broadcast it, hey.
yeah, it's just very easy to pick yourself apart, and I guess just see yourself as having way more struggles than everyone else, or struggling more in certain aspects of life than everyone else.
I think this self-doubt never goes away. I think it just gets quieter, but it's still somewhat there. Like even at my highest point when I was doing the best I was possibly doing with racing, there was always that little voice that was like, are you as good as them? Can you do that? And the more preparation, the more effort and work I'd put into myself, that voice would get quieter, but I could never quite shut it off. And I know I would go days where literally 2 to 3 days apart, I would be like, what am I doing? Why am I racing? I suck. Like you have a bad day, you have a bad training session on the bike, and you just spiral. And then 2 days later, I could have like one of the best runs I've ever done and be like, no, it was that sporadic in my mind sometimes, from what am I doing? Do I want to do this anymore? Am I even good enough to do this? To then, oh no, I'm exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I need to do. Have you felt that
Yeah,
as well?
yeah, 100%. Like when I was in 2019, when I did the full USA BMX season in A Pro, there's a guy that I was racing, and I still to this day believe he's like better than me for whatever reason. But that entire season, I think we raced each other like 18 times for the year, and he never beat me in one race. But he, like, for some reason, I still to this day, I'm like, he must just be a better bike rider than me, because he gets like a lot of hype and stuff like that. But I did hear, I can't remember who said it. I heard a while ago something that I drill into the kids I coach now a lot. And it was like the rule of thirds in training. And it was someone training for the Olympics, and they were having like a bad day, and their coach said to them, they were like, it's the rule of thirds. So it's like, if you're feeling good all the time, you're probably not training enough to get good, because you're obviously well recovered all the time. And if you're feeling crap all the time, you're obviously overtraining. But it's like you should a third of the time feel crap, a third of the time feel all right, and then a third of the time feel good. And then that's how you know you're doing well. And like when I'm training now, if like my times aren't good, or kids I'm coaching, if their times like aren't good and they're like upset about it, I'm like, you can't get faster every day. Like you've got to take a step back to take two forward. And I think, like what you were saying, I think I had troubles with that even when I was winning in America in A Pro and stuff. I would like have a bad training session. I'm like, why am I doing this? And then on the weekend I'd win, and then I'd be like, oh, that's why I'm doing it. And then 2 days later I'd have a bad session. I'm like, I'd beat myself up over it, and I'm like, but you've just won, so like, don't worry about it.
It's so easy. I think athletes were very, like when I was an athlete, we're very sporadic when it comes to emotions, because it is all on you, and there's so many eyes and pressure and all that obviously can go great, but when it's not, you kind of can get in your own head about where you're at. What did you find the best way to kind of like silence that self-doubt? Because you said obviously you got better at it. Was it just repetition and just grinding it out? Was that the main thing that you felt you did?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just putting in the work and like giving yourself a reason to believe in yourself, I think. So like even last year, it was just like a Queensland title, but I decided like I was going to race it, and I was like, all I want to do is win it. And leading up to that race, I like put everything I could into diet. I was ice bathing every day. I was doing everything I could. And when I got to that race, like I never in my head thought I'd get anything besides first. And I think that was just because I put everything I could into the training that I had no reason to doubt myself. Or it's like you would have heard like Alex Hormozy when he talks about like giving yourself an undeniable stack of proof that you are who you say you are. And I think I've come to realize over my career that the only reason I doubted myself in certain situations was when I knew I didn't do everything I could to get what I wanted.
Mm. Yeah, I felt that as well.
Yeah.
You kind of, when you have that confidence about you and you rock up and nothing phases you because you've done the work, you've done the preparation. And then when you haven't, like it'd be so obvious at a World Cup, watching someone stress about their bike, stress about the track, stress about the weather, all these different things. And it's like, man, you haven't done the preparation, and now you're trying to find all these things that you can start blaming.
Yeah.
When realistically, you just need to look in the mirror and go, I didn't prepare properly. And because of that, I'm in this place now.
100%. The amount of races I think I've gone to in my career where I know I hadn't prepared the way I should have. And then on race day, I'd be like trying to change gearings, change the height of my bars, change all these.
Searching, man.
Yeah, 100%. And just like trying to basically band-aid a problem that I didn't commit enough 4 months ago.
Mm.
And then you're just trying to find all these little secrets. And it's so funny to look back on now, because when I'm coaching kids and stuff, they're like, oh, I need to change my gearing. And I'm like, you don't. You just need to train harder. But it's like a couple of years ago, I was still doing the same thing.
Yeah. I had this like idea in my head that you have to fill this pain bucket to become a great athlete. And that could be in the gym, that could be sacrificing things, whether it's going out, whether it's being around family, whether it's being around friends. It's like you have to go through a certain level of pain or fill this pain bucket. And each time you do one of those things, you get a bit closer to, okay, when this is full, then when I go to an event or a race, I can just, I've filled it, I'm done. And if you don't, that's why when you see people stressed, they start going through this like mental pain of like, oh man, what do I do? And you see them freaking out and getting stressed. I'm like, they're trying to fill that bucket and they don't have the time to do it. So it's like, one thing I'll say to anyone that wants to be an athlete, it's like, you have to go through a large amount of pain, and like, you kind of somewhat enjoy it. Like, it's not all bad. Like, training super hard is hard, but you've kind of fall in love with it. Obviously, sacrificing time with people you care about and love is also kind of hard, but it's like what you get back from it. But yeah, you need to know that it, like, this is hard and it's going to go on for a while, but you need to go through that to then obviously achieve what you want. And it's like this, how would you describe it? It's like you go through all this pain and then you get this big relief of actually performing on the day, and then you get to sit in that and you know all the hard work that went into that. It's like you're never going to properly feel a high unless you've gone through the pain of that low leading into it. Like, that's when everything becomes so much more emotional, when something is so hard to obtain. It's not when you just get it easy. Like, you see so many you'd probably see this young athletes that win a lot when they're quite young and they haven't actually put in the work, they haven't gone through the pain, they haven't gone through the effort. And then they start to lose and they just check out straight away because they don't know that feeling of like, I had to work hard for this. They kind of just got it. Have you seen that a lot in, like, especially in the BMX scene?
Yeah, 100%. We actually did like a coaching seminar this year with the like Oz cycling crew, and they were saying in that there's never, in the history of BMX in Australia, there's never been a person that's won a junior world title or like in an amateur class and then gone on to be an elite world champion. It's never, ever happened. So Saya, that just won the Olympics, she'll probably be the first person to do it when she does win a world title. But up till now, no one's ever done it because they've all, I guess you see them, and half of them, I guess, are good because they're just big at a young age. So they're just quicker than everyone else. And then they get to junior and elite and everyone's like 17, 18, 19. They mature. Everyone hits puberty and stuff. And then they don't have that advantage of size. And then they realize that they've lacked work for the last however many years and then start getting beaten. And then in BMX also probably a little different to downhill. Like you can't, it's an art in itself being able to race in a pack. So if a kid's won his whole life and then starts getting beaten, he doesn't know how to ride with wheels in front of him and behind him. So it's like that's a whole nother skill in itself that you got to develop. And I was lucky, like growing up, I was always a very small kid, and any race I ever won, I would come from behind. Like I would always be last out of the gate, and then I'd have to catch up and make passes. So I was always very creative on the track. So I was like the complete opposite to all these people. So you definitely see it big time in BMX.
They haven't learned how to lose.
Yeah, exactly. And my dad was always great for that. He always told me that if you don't know how to lose, you'll never know how to win. And because like obviously as a kid, I would get upset if I lost and stuff. And he's like, never come off the track crying or like annoyed at yourself. He's like, you can be annoyed at yourself, but just learn from it and then go be better. He's like, but if you don't know how to lose, you'll never know how to win.
I think it's the feeling of losing, knowing how much it sucks, and then realizing you don't want to feel that. And then, okay, well, how do I not feel that? Well, I put in more work.
Yeah.
I figure it out. Where if you're winning from a young age and you're not really, like you said, you get those kids that have matured early, they're a bit bigger, they're a bit stronger, they've got natural talent. Like they're just going to steamroll everyone up until the point you get to like under 17s, under 19s. You're like, okay, everyone's kind of caught up now.
Yeah.
Like where's the difference going to be? And then when you get into the elite ranks, it's like, okay, well, everyone's training hard, eating right, got good bike skill, got good talent. And you're like, I see so many kids, man, especially their parents push them into it.
Yeah.
And their parents are the ones, like they're living through their kids and their kids have talent. So their kids are doing well. And then they get to 18 and 19 and go, well, do I actually want to do this? Like, I don't have to live with my parents anymore. I don't really want to ride bikes. I'm not winning anymore because all the other kids have caught up to me. Like,
100%. And I was very lucky in that regard. Like my parents would always come to me and be like, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Because I started in motocross when I was like 4 and then kind of transitioned into BMX. And I think I fell out of love with motocross because my dad was a really good motocross rider. And I felt like I had to live up to something doing that sport, whereas BMX was like my own path. And so I kind of went into BMX, and in BMX, basically mum and dad were like, if you want to race locally, you can race locally. We'll sell your expensive bikes, get you something chill. We'll take you every Friday night. You can race. But if you want to race like overseas and at Worlds and all that, we'll take you, but you've got to do the work at home. Whereas even these days, you see it a lot. Parents like push their kids into it, or their parents will make excuses for the kids to not do the work. There's always like, I deal with it a fair bit at coaching, but there's always like a reason little Johnny can't do something, or like he's got homework, or, and it's like, instead of just being like, help them be better at time management, get the work done, and then if they want to do it, they'll do it, and if they don't want to do it, then like there's plenty of other sports that I'm sure they'd love to do. But what I was going to say earlier is I think this day and age, there's like me and one other person that actually lives here on the Goldie that are still like heavily involved in the sport from like growing up. Every other kid that we raced in our age group that was like top in Australia have all like disappeared, and pretty much all of them had pushy parents.
Yeah.
And none of them have like lasted in the sport. They've all just got jobs or whatever they're doing. I'm sure they're doing great, but none of them stuck around in the sport because they all lost that love for it.
It's such a fine line between pushing your kids into a sport and pushing them out of it.
Yeah.
And it's like how you balance that. And like you said, your parents like, I will provide you with help. I will guide you, especially if you ask for it. But I don't want to be the one jumping down your throat trying to get you to do everything that I wish I did in my career.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that most of the time that happens, and people, like, again, living through your kids, like, I didn't make it, but if my son makes it, then I've kind of made it. And they put that pressure on their kids, and like, man, it's this whole idea of like when dad becomes coach, and you play that role of coach and dad, and you're like, I just want my dad to love me, and if I don't do well at the race, dad gets annoyed. So now, are you being my dad or my coach?
Yeah.
So I talked to a sports psych about this, and it's like, as if you can afford to get coaching that isn't from a parent, do that, because one, the kid will probably listen more, and if it gets disappointed because you've done something wrong or haven't trained, it's a lot easier for your coach to be annoyed at you than your father. And it doesn't have that pressure and doesn't tie in, because that's like, why would you want to do a sport where it affects the love of your family? You know what I mean? It's like, I do well, dad's excited. I do bad, dad's annoyed, or mum, or whoever it may be.
Yeah.
And you go, I'd rather just not do that and not deal with that emotion of like that volatile situation where my results are based around what love I receive. Like,
Yeah,
that's fucked.
100%.
It's so fucked.
100%. Like I've seen it for so many years, and I was lucky with my parents. Like my mum, I would come off the track 7th, and she'd be like, "Oh, you did great,"
Yeah. But
and which was awesome. And then my dad was like the harder parent, but he would only be hard on me if he knows I didn't do as well as I could because I didn't give my all. So he would be hard on me, but more in like a discipline of I'm his child kind of thing. So if like I was doing a race and I was just being soft and backed off because there was a kid near me, he'd be kind of annoyed at me and be like, you could have done better because you did this. And then I'd go do it and I'd go win. And then he'd be like, see, he's like, I'm never annoyed at you. He's like, if you get 8th, but you pedal all the way to the finish line and do your best, I'll be stoked for you. He's like, but don't roll around the track and then come off annoyed when I know you didn't do as good as you could have. So I was like kind of lucky. I got both sides of it, but it was never result dependent. It was effort dependent. But I see a lot of people at coaching and stuff nowadays where there's been a couple parents where I've had to go to them and be like, I'm the coach, you're the dad. I'll do my job, you do your job kind of thing, because I'll coach them some way and then the dad will kind of step in and try have his say, and then they'll go to races and the dad will stress the kid out. And then I'm like, racing's stressful enough. Like BMX is a dangerous sport. Every time we get on the gate, people get hurt. Like there's brain injuries, people break their backs, necks, all this stuff. I'm like, we don't need extra pressure from dad wanting us to get third. Like, and half of them is 9 years old. Like they're not going to the Olympics tomorrow.
yeah.
And it can be pretty bad in BMX, which is why like I've taken a pretty big role of trying to like bring the fun back to the sport and do like a lot of ride days, or try and do ride days where it's like no racing involved. We just go to the track, everyone rides, has a good time, and then it's like try and just make the whole sport more enjoyable and take that aspect out of it a little bit, because it gets pretty hectic in BMX.
I was going to say, you've gone motocross, which is hectic. You always hear moto parents, then you've gone BMX, but BMX parents are also quite gnarly as well.
Yeah, and then now that I'm like kind of in the mountain bike world, I'm kind of seeing
how much more chill it is.
Another side. Yeah, it's like, I'm like, wow, like Ignition last weekend, I'm like, there's events where people just come and ride bikes for a weekend. I'm like, that's insane. But it is cool.
No one's going to hit at anyone. No one's going to...
Yeah.
No one's mum's throwing chairs into the,
into
the stand.
Exactly. And I think BMX and motocross is pretty gnarly in the aspect that we do race each other. We can take people out. We don't have our own track. We're not racing the clock in that aspect. So it's like, it's very easy to blame other people. And I think that's why there'll be like a lot of tensions. Like you'll go to BMX and there's so many families that won't talk to each other, and like all these kids hate each other at 8 years old. And I'm like, you're riding bikes. Just like go have fun. If he takes you out and like he didn't really mean it, just move on and enjoy it. Or else like you hold that resentment forever. Then you go to another race, start focusing on that one kid, but forget there's 6 other people on the gate that you got to race. And then it just becomes a whole mental thing.
Yeah, you become fixated with one person
and
they control your emotions around that sport.
Exactly.
So I've got to beat this guy, or this guy took me out last week. And you don't focus on what you need to do, you're focusing on what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
It gets shifted quite quickly.
When you were racing, were you motivated by not losing or by winning? I like think about this a lot. I dwell on it a lot.
Probably not losing. One of the things that I realized, and I realized it quite young, was like it comes back to what your dad said. When I gave my best, I was pretty happy, man. Like if I gave everything, like really gave everything, and only you know what your everything is, that you should be content with that. Like I think people forget, and I was forgetting this when I was quite young, is like that's all you've got at the time. Like your best can get better, but at the time, if I gave everything I had, like turned over every stone, put in every ounce of effort I could, no matter where I showed up on that results list, I was happy. And I think once you say you start to do everything in preparation that you think you should do, when you rock up and put everything into something, no matter where you end up, like you should be proud of yourself that you put everything into that. And I had races where I crashed. I had races where I didn't do as well as I had in the past, but I gave everything, and I was more happy with that. Like my most memorable run was at Worlds in 2019, and I crashed at the bottom because I went for a gap that only Loic did. So it was like I was like I went for it.
Yeah.
I was like all or nothing, and to actually like everyone says that all or nothing, I'm going to go for it, but to actually live that, and I was on one of my best runs I've ever done, and obviously didn't finish that way, but I was like I went for it, man. I put everything I had into this, and it didn't pay off, but like that's life. Like life doesn't always work out but as long as you're happy with yourself and your effort that you're putting into it, get up, dust your knees off, and go into the next one. And then the next one I got, what did I get? I got 10th on the day and 10th in the overall, and that was like a massive goal of mine. And then that set me up on like one of the proudest moments I had in racing, and that was like a couple of weeks after what could have been looked at as a massive failure. And I was like,
Yeah.
But I was like, I remember I got to the bottom. I've talked about this all the time, so I'll go over it briefly. But I saw my dad, and he came over to watch, and he came up to me, and he was kind of like looking pretty bummed that I just crashed in my world champs run and I was on a good run. And I looked at him, I was like, how good was that? And he didn't expect this excitement out of me that I just crashed, and I was like over the moon. And I'm like, if you had been in my head and seen and felt what I'd felt up until that point of crashing, there's no way I couldn't have been excited, because I was riding the best I could have ever ridden on a day of world champs in front of thousands of people. And I was like, that's the feeling I guess you try and create with any athlete wants to create, is doing their skill to the best possible ability that they can in front of the world. So it's like, if you can do that, man, that's the win. Everyone gets so caught up on the idea of the results, but I'm like, why did you start riding a bike? Why are you racing? It's like to create a feeling in your body that is to like transcend who you are and step outside of the norm of life and go into this flow state of just being and doing what you love. And I got to experience that. So how couldn't I be happy? It's like things don't always pan out, but as long as you can be happy doing the thing you want to do, then focus on that.
Yeah, that's epic. That's a great way to look at it. Like, even while you were just saying that, then I was thinking back to when I was like racing in America, at like when I was riding some of my best, and like I think 2019 at the USA Grands we have like a race of champions and a Grand Nationals, and it's like Friday, Saturday, and when you race all day to get to the final, and then when you get to the final you do 3 mains from 3 different lanes, so it's like you don't have an advantage of inside, you got to scatter across. And my parents flew all the way to America for that one, and it was like one of them races where I like never doubted myself, nothing, and riding that weekend was probably like the best I've ever felt on my bike. And like both days I won all 3 mains from all 3 lanes. And like while you were saying that, I was thinking to that race exactly, and like I felt the feeling I had going around the track that day was like effortless, but it was almost like I didn't have to try, but everything I'd ever worked for in my life was just all coming together on the track that day. Like none of my gates felt like I had to try too hard, which like obviously in BMX, gating is like, you got to be so switched on. The timing and everything connecting properly, and I didn't have to think about any of it. It all just worked. And then, yeah, while you were saying that story, it's like the feeling I was having on the track that day was insane. And then when I won it, even though it was a goal I was chasing for like 5 years, when I won it, I was like numb because I didn't know what to do anymore. I was like, I wanted this for so many years and I finally got it, and I almost didn't expect myself to ever win it. And then it's like I'd achieved this goal. My parents were in America for it for the first time. Like everything kind of all happened on this one night. And then I like became numb, and I was like, once I had won, I was like, wasn't even stoked anymore. But like you were saying, the feeling of riding early that day was like everything I'd chased for years.
And then you kind of had what now?
Yeah. And then it's like leading up to that point, I had a huge goal of like go over in A Pro, which is like 250s in Supercross kind of thing, win as much as I could in that, get a like deal to support me for elite, and then go over the next year for elite. And then I kind of won it and kind of had that like, what now? And then I was like, all right, let's focus for next year. And then like COVID came, and then that was it. Like I never went back to America until end of last year. So I stayed home in Australia for like 3 years.
How was that feeling of kind of the path you thought you were about to go down and then that shifting dramatically?
It was definitely tough. Like during COVID, I had months where I sat in my bedroom and never did anything. Like I had, obviously where I lived, the beaches were open. We could go like hang out at the beach, surf and stuff. And then, but there was days where I was living with my sister at the time, and I would just like sit in my bedroom all day, just like kind of looking at my laptop, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to make money? And I was like living off of the money I made at Grands the year before, because I was lucky enough to have a sponsor that paid me like decent bonuses. But before that, I didn't really have people paying me anything. It was like prize money. So I was like, it was a pretty rough period. And then that's kind of how I fell into coaching. Someone reached out one day and was like, my kid's been struggling for a while and isn't getting anywhere. Would you mind doing some work with him? So I did. And I was like, I can make a little bit of money doing this. And I worked with this one kid. And then we trained for a while, and he ended up like getting like third in Queensland and then third in Australia that year. And he wasn't making finals like at Queensland's or Nationals or anything. So that was like a pretty big deal. And then they put a post on Facebook thanking me. And it kind of I just had like inquiries coming left, right and center then. And this whole coaching business that I have now just took off from that one kid when I was like, his dad reaching out when I was sitting in my bedroom, like almost depressed, not knowing what I was going to do with my life, because everything I'd worked on for years just came to a halt. And then that kind of led me to my life now.
Down there. It's so common though, man, like for an athlete to not have a purpose. And especially the way it was taken away. Like most people obviously retire and then it's gone, but they've kind of prepared for it. Where COVID was just like hard stop.
Yeah.
And you got to go, who am I? What am I actually doing? What do I want to do? Because it kind of, obviously you couldn't do everything, but you could still obviously do stuff. But the main thing that you've put all your energy into was just suddenly taken away. And you go, well, what do I actually want to do and how am I going to do that? And it obviously leads you, if you keep your eyes open wide enough, you can find new paths to go down and realize that there's always a way. There's always a new way to go down, but it definitely shifts your momentum from like when you make a plan, you want to go down that plan at least a little bit and see how it feels, but have it just like stop like that. Do you look back at that now and the direction it's gone? Would you want to go back and change that?
No, I definitely wouldn't change it, because like my life right now is like obviously not my dream life, because I never thought it would end up like this. But like right now, the way I'm living, the things I'm doing, the people I'm helping, all that stuff is like I'm stoked on it. I love it. But there's a lot of me that questions what could have been. And I think some days I wake up and I'm like, I kind of live with like that what if, which I would love to somehow get rid of. But I've also kind of, from that situation, learnt that like life is a roller coaster and you've got to be adaptive and just roll with the punches. And as opportunities come, like say yes, dive in, see what happens, and then figure it out along the way. So I think from that aspect, I'm glad everything's happened the way it has. And like the coaching I have at home now is like incredible. The group of people I've got, it also made me like fall into like doing YouTube, and I held my own ride event and started my own clothing company, and like everything from COVID has become like super great in my life. So I definitely wouldn't take it back, but it's just like the what ifs that I kind of deal with. And like, I see people that I was beating back in 2019 going to the Olympics and like this year and doing things like that. And I'm like, I just kind of sit and question. I'm like, what if I stayed on that path? What if I gave it another 5 years or whatever? But I definitely obviously can't go back. So it's one of them things I've got to live with, and I can either look back at it on it as a positive.
Why can't you go back?
I mean, I could go back to racing.
Yeah.
I just can't go back in the time.
Yeah, I get that. But
Yeah.
like in the racing, would you go back and try and have a crack at doing the Olympics?
It's kind of something I like ponder on at the moment. It's just like I look at the racing now and like since I stopped racing like competitively and like at like the world level, it's like it's a very different sport. So I kind of want to like I've started training again now and I want to do World Cups and stuff next year. But it's like it's gonna be rough.
Just like jumping back in the deep end kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And like the sport, like the tracks have changed a lot. The guys are like just so insanely fast, but it's just I definitely want to just have like another stab at it and see what I can do, because I miss the racing as well. And yeah, it's like those things. It's like I don't want to live my whole life going, what if I just did a little bit more?
Yeah, why you still can.
But then I kind of look like when you were retiring and you had that crash, like how do you deal, like did you ever get to a point where you were like, I might retire, and then you were like, I might go a little bit longer?
It was a hard decision, man. I definitely ummed and ahed about it a lot, but I just knew at that time I just wasn't, like I remember I'd go to races and just say there's a gap that everyone starts pulling and it's faster, like half a second faster if you pull this gap. It's sketchy, but everyone's kind of doing it and you just do it. You just be like, well, that's the line, that's quicker. And I remember I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to pull that gap. And that was like a bit of if you're not going to put yourself at the very point of that spear to try and go as fast as you can, like, why are you here? When you start not racing to win or do the best you can, you kind of like start to question, why am I doing this? And I don't know, it's just, there's a lot of factors, man. Like being away for so long kind of wears away at you as well. Like going to the same places all the time. I always hate complaining about going to the same places, but like you go to Fort William 10 times in a row, man. Like you stay in the exact same hotel, you go to the exact same track. Like it looks from the outside like you're seeing the world, and it's like you're kind of just seeing 5 or 6 different places, because you rock up to the airport, go straight to accommodation, sleep, recover, go to the track, walk the track, start practice, finish practice, go to the next like track. It's very like like planned out. And when you start to look at your life and you know exactly how every day is going to look, no matter how exciting that day is, it kind of, I don't know, it just didn't excite me like it used to. And obviously the level was rising up so much, and you can't mess around with that. Like you said, if you're not giving it your all, you're kind of just making up the numbers then. And it's like, I didn't want to do that either. So I was just like, well, I don't want to waste people's time and effort and money by being in something that I'm not fully in. But I also just didn't want to be in it either. So it was like, it got to that point. I do miss bits of it, man. Like I look back at like 2018, 2019, and some of the best years of my life, racing, competing and pushing myself. But then like COVID kind of changed me, because it made me realize I didn't need riding. Like it was like a forced retirement. And I was like, well, I don't need this. Like I can actually do other things and find happiness in other places. And once I realized that, it didn't seem as important as it used to. And I kind of wish it didn't change like that. Like I wished, like you said, what if COVID didn't happen? Like I just came off, 2019 was the best season I had, and I was so excited for 2020, and then COVID happened and I didn't get to experience it. So it's like, what if that didn't happen? Where would my career be now? Like I don't know, but I think that what if question is just wasted energy. It's like as soon as you put energy into what if, it's like it doesn't mean anything. It's fake. Like what if this happens? Like it doesn't matter what if. It's what's going to happen now. What can I do now to set myself up for a life that I actually want to live, and put energy into that?
Yeah. And I think like what you were just saying there, like kind of hits home for me, because I'm like, when you were saying like you weren't like fully in and weren't willing to like obviously risk what those guys are willing to risk, is when I talk about wanting to go back as well, is like that's what I'm questioning, because I'm like, I want to race because I love it and I love the competition side and I love seeing how like good I can get or whatever. But then I'm like, I have a full coaching business back here. I have a clothing company. I have all these things that I could just continue living this nice life on the Sunshine Coast, not have to travel too much. Or I jump back into that, which at some points back in the day used to be hell. like traveling the world, spending all this money, having horrible races, like doing all this thing. So it's like when I like kind of think about the two, I'm like, what do I really want to do? But it's like every day when I wake up, I always just think about racing, if that makes sense.
What's the biggest thing you miss?
I just love getting on the gate with people and just, I genuinely think it's the mental aspect, actually. I love the mental game of racing, and I love getting on the gate with people and being like, play games in my own head and be like, I know I'm mentally stronger than you, and therefore when this gate drops, I'm going to beat you, kind of thing. And I think that comes from growing up. I was actually super weak mentally. I think I had like 4 or 5 national titles in a row where I nearly won every lap the whole day, and in the final I got 4th. I never got on the podium. I got 4th 5 years in a row. And one day I was racing, and I think it was like the first time I'd missed a pro final at a race that was like within Queensland. And I was just like, this is bad. Like it was kind of like what you were talking about before. I'm like, I need to either just stop racing or I need to invest more money and do this properly. And I was friends with like Chris Vermeulen, the MotoGP rider, and he put me onto like a psychologist, but she wasn't like a sports psych. She worked like a lot deeper than that. And I went and seen her a couple times, and then I went on like a streak where I got like 21 podiums in a row. Went from not making the final, seen her twice, and then didn't miss a podium for like a year. And I think the change in how I approach racing and how I approach life after working with her, I enjoyed the mental aspect, which beforehand I hated that. Like I would get so nervous, and I'd have race days where I hated being there because I was like, couldn't handle the nerves and stuff. So I'd just be so stressed out. And I think that's what I love now, is like seeing how mentally strong I can be when it comes to racing, which I guess are things you could do in business and stuff like that. But I guess I'm not at the point where anything's that stressful.
Do you remember like any piece of advice that was really, really crucial in changing your mindset?
Not particularly. This was a long time ago, but it was more like she worked with like my past, and a lot of it came back from like traumas of me trying to be good enough in motocross for dad, or like, which was all made up in my own head. My dad never expected me to be anything. It's just like I knew he was good, so I made up in my own head that I need to be really good or I'll never make him happy or please him or anything else. But she kind of just, pardon?
I was just laughing because it's such a common thing. Like, I thought I had to build my own house because my dad did.
Yeah.
He built a helicopter in the shed, so I was like, well, I better build. He built our house when we were like, I was a baby.
Yeah.
Built it from scratch, and then he built a helicopter in the shed out of boxes and learned how to fly it. So I was like, I better build my own house. But it's that pressure you put on yourself where like my dad didn't care if I built my own house. He just wanted me to do whatever I wanted to do. But you said that invisible pressure from someone can alter how you show up to the world.
Yeah, 100%. And my dad like had a successful business when I was growing up and stuff. He owned a lot of machinery and that. So I always even looked at that and I was like, if me being like a mediocre bike rider, like compared to my dad who has multiple houses and a great business and all this stuff and a family and everything, it would be the same thing. I'd compare to that and I'm like, am I wasting time or should I start working? And then, and I think it just came from that, and she kind of broke that down in the sessions, and she was like, you don't have to be anything for anyone except like for yourself, and everything that you do day in, day out. At the end of the day, no one actually really cares what you're doing. Just go and enjoy what you're doing and what you want to do. And then I think that's like where the shift kind of came from, is when she just kind of like reaffirmed that it's my life. I can kind of do what I want. And if I don't want to do it, go like find something else, which I still sometimes struggle with, like to this day. Like sometimes I'll be like, I want to do this, but then I'll make a decision based off what I think other people want me to do. And I'm like, people aren't even thinking about me, let alone what they think I should be doing. But it's just like made up in my own head of what I think that they think I should be doing. And then I like twist my decisions based around all that.
It's crazy to like hear that, but it's also so common for people to do it. It's like, I will do this because of how it's viewed by the world.
Yeah.
Not what you want to do, not what feels right for you. How will this be viewed by everyone else? And is that how I want it to be viewed? Because it makes me look a certain way through other people's eyes. And like you said, no one gives a shit. Like,
Yeah.
how often, it's like you always hear that term, like, you're only as good as your last race. Like, how quickly people forget. Like, I always thought it was brutal when you'd have like a world championships and then a week after you'd have another World Cup. Like, I always like the idea of the last race being the world championship. So that kind of like the world champion is kind of in everyone's mind for that off season, because it's like the biggest race of the year. Give that person the kind of, I'm going to say respect, but the hype that they deserve. But like for this year, like for example, this year, like Loris Vergier won, became world champion. I think a week later they raced Ludon Vial or somewhere, and he didn't do that well. So I'm like, you are literally champion of the world one week, and then no one is even mentioning your name the next.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can still be world champion and no one cares a week later almost. Like, it's still there, and obviously you've still got it, but it's how quickly people forget and how people just don't care.
100%. And that's like what I was going off before when I was saying that I was like so into sport growing up that like I knew, especially bike sports, like I knew every MotoGP rider, Supercross rider, downhill rider, BMX rider, like all of it. I knew them all. And I go to coaching now and I'll like try and use a pro that's like winning World Cups right now as an example, and kids will go, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "What are you kids doing? Like, do you not watch the sport?" But then I'm like, I go home and think about it, and I'm like, that just puts it in perspective that these kids are just out here riding their bikes and loving their life and having fun, and they don't give a shit what other people are doing. And I'm like, so when I make decisions and I'm trying to please everyone, no one is actually thinking about anything I'm doing except myself. And I just like always have to step back because I still do it on a day-to-day basis. Like, I'll want to go do a race and I'll be like, but if I leave, like, what about these people that want to do training next week? And I'm like, that'll be all right. Like, but I always just think about what other people think of me before I make any decisions. And like, it's something I'm working on and I think I'm getting better at, but it's definitely something I still deal with.
But how crazy that you're letting other people determine what you do in your life.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I don't know. Looking back on my career as well, I think I would have made a lot different decisions if that wasn't a case for me. But I think I just am naturally a people pleaser, and I will always try and put other people's happiness and well-being before my own, and therefore I always take into consideration what other people think before I make them decisions, which I'm sure there's a better way to manage it, but I haven't figured it out.
Do you ever I was thinking this the other day. I was thinking, if money wasn't an issue, what would I do now? If time wasn't an issue, what would I do now? If like a relationship wasn't an issue, what would I do now? And you can kind of break down exactly what you would do in situations if you took out those factors and then just work out ways to work around those factors.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's like, oh, I do it, but I don't have the cash. Oh, I do this, but I don't have this. I'm like, okay, well, how do I get the money to do this then? How do I free up time so I can do this? And it comes back to, what do I actually want? Not what does my family want, not does my friends want, not does my partner want, not my kids. Like, what do I want? What makes me happy?
Yeah.
And then lean into that.
Yeah, well, I listened to, it was a while ago I listened to it, but it was like someone was talking about the exact same concept, and they were like, if no one else's opinion mattered, would you date the same person you're dating? And it was like 95% of people would date someone completely different if they weren't worried about what other people would think of them.
That's wild.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's so insane. Because, yeah, it's like, it's crazy how your life would be different if you just were like somehow in your own bubble and no one else's opinions could ever enter your brain.
And you can like have that but
yeah,
it's hard, man. It's hard to not. It's like everyone says it's like, oh, I just don't give a fuck, and I always balance like it's good to give a fuck. It's good to care about what people think, because sometimes they can steer you down the right path as well. Like if you're being a dick and you're putting out this energy that isn't right, if your friends are giving you feedback saying, man, you probably should change this. Like you don't want to just not care about that, but also it's like, whose opinion do you trust and why do you trust them? And also even with that, even if I trust their opinion, I still want to do what I want to do. And it shouldn't matter if my friends are going, oh, you should date this girl, or shouldn't date that girl, or you should get this job. It's like, it comes back to only you see what's inside your head. Only you know how something makes you feel.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of basis of it all. Like, why are you holding on to something where you know, like, and again, that comes back to racing. Like, I knew the feelings I had in my body when I wanted that more than anything else. Like I remember in training, getting up in the morning, going to races, I knew how much I wanted it. Like I wanted it more than anything else. I was obsessed by it. I wanted to push myself. I wanted to be the best I could be. And then when that kind of fell away, I was just like, well, why am I doing this? And
Yeah.
when I lost that, it was like, well, there's no point in putting myself in this much danger for something that doesn't even really fulfill me like it used to. And that's not saying I still didn't enjoy it, but nowhere near as much as you should if you're going to try and be the best in the world at something. Like
Yeah, for sure.
It needs to become an obsession. Like it needs to almost be unhealthy to a point.
Yeah. And that's like me, I think right now is like, I'm kind of in that transition period. Like when you asked the question before about why don't I go back to racing? Because it's like, I'm trying to figure out kind of exactly what I want. Like I'll think about racing a lot, but then I'll also think about other things I'm doing and how I want to grow them and where I want to take them and stuff. And,
You can't just dip your toe in.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, I think I've always been like a results driven person my whole life. Like since I was so young, I was obsessed with the Olympics and just sport in general. All I wanted to do was be an athlete. Whereas like now I look more at life as like where I want to do things that are like purpose driven. And like the things that like make me happiest is helping people do things. And then I'm like, if I go back to racing, like I don't know if I have that desire anymore because I'm lean more towards like the purpose driven stuff. Like helping kids achieve their results makes me way happier than me winning a race.
Yeah.
Or like last week I had a team over from Singapore that I was training, and like on the last day of training I gave them all one of my jerseys, and like the girl was like in tears. And I'm like, this is the stuff that makes me happy, and no race I win will ever like make me this stoked.
Yeah. So I think once you realize that, you kind of
Yeah.
you know where you're at. I guess the only thing that can tie in with that is like going and putting that effort and kind of coming back and showing that can inspire those kids as well.
Yeah.
And you can look at it like that. You're like, me showing that you can come back and put effort in and like it's not over. That like that's inspiring to people. People see that and they're like, oh my God, like you can come back and you can put everything into something and it's never too late. And like that's a cool storyline as well. So you can kind of balance that as well. Like that's inspiring people, not just obviously the help you give them when you're coaching them, but kind of live by example as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It can go both ways. So it's like using that as fuel.
Yeah.
Like you're saying where you get your happiness fulfillment from. It's like switch the racing where it's like you might not get as much joy out of winning, but you can inspire someone which could pull more joy out of that situation.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I
It
mean?
definitely can be like that. Because even like my nieces are dancers, like gun dancers, and they want to, like for some reason, want to do BMX. And I'm like the thought of them coming to the BMX track and teaching them how to ride properly and doing all that stuff gets me so stoked. But it's like my sister always rings me as well when I'm overseas racing. And it's like my nieces are like glued to the TV watching me race. So it's like, I guess it does have that. Like they watch me race overseas, and then when I come home, they want to come do BMX with me, if that makes sense. Or like when I'm doing crank works and that's kind of stuff. So I'm like, I guess in a way it does, because like if they watch me race on that level, then that inspires them to want to do kind of what I'm doing. But I think it's, just finding a way to manage and balance for both of them.
They idolize you. They want to be somewhat you.
Yeah.
'Cause they see that life and they're like, oh, I want a piece of that.
Yeah.
So what's your main focus now with racing? Because I see you doing the crank works. How many events are you doing? Pump track, slalom?
I was doing pump track, slalom, air downhill, speed and style sometimes, but it just got removed from the calendar. Like it's not a thing anymore.
Really?
No. I got no idea why. I just heard this the other day. It's not an event anymore though. And then I don't even know. That's probably it.
That's it for now.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, because I think the only event I don't do slope style obviously because it's invite, and I don't do actual downhill because I don't have a downhill bike. I just take like a slalom bike, ride that for air downhill, and then do pump track. But pump track's like how I got involved in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been winning that a lot recently.
Yeah, I think I've won 5 since I started.
Yeah.
But I think I won the national title for pump track in 2022, and that was the year that Crankworks was first coming to Australia. So then I got an invite for pump track there, and then I was lucky enough to win my first one. So then I got invited on to like do the full world tour and kind of whatever events I wanted to do, and I've done it ever since.
True. What do you think of those events, like Crankworks events, and are you doing all of them or just the ones like more locally?
Uh, no, 2023 I did all of them. And then last year I just missed Austria, but now Austria is not a stop anyway. Um, but I love it because it's like what we talked about earlier. It's like that super fun aspect of riding. It's just like a festival, and then there's like events, and it's like a great example of as soon as you finish racing, no one gives a shit what you came. It's like the events I've won gold at, or the events I've not even got on the podium at, is like nothing's changed. You walk around, everyone treats you the same. The after party's the same. Like, and I think it's just like a great example of just everyone's there traveling the world to have fun riding bikes, and everyone just has a great time. And I think it's like one of the rare sports where usually people don't get too upset if they do bad, or like, yeah, at that event, which I like.
Yeah, the atmosphere kind of creates that feeling of it's all good either way.
Yeah, 100%. It's like you finish racing and they do the podium, and then there's just like a live DJ, and people are in the bar, and kids are doing like kids works and all that stuff. And it's like no one, like it's awesome if you do win or whatever, but it's like even if you don't, it's such a fun event that you leave with so many memories, and you always meet so many people, and it's just like great to be a part of.
Yeah, you just enjoy it.
Yeah. And it's like even how all the officials and stuff is like close with the athletes, and it's like I don't know what downhill's like, but in BMX it's like there's a pretty big divide between officials and athletes, and
Yeah.
so it's like at Crankworks, it's like you'll be at the after party, and the guy that owns Crankworks is out there with you, and the marketing girls are there, and the officials are there, and it's like everyone just hangs out as buddies, and then you kind of just go to work, race, they do their job, and then everyone comes together at the end of the day again.
A bit more connected.
Yeah.
I was going to say, looking now, switching gears, looking at the World Cups, have you seen a big change in just being a fan viewing that of what it's been, and like what do you think the future of like downhill racing in that in cross country in that terms is going?
I don't, since they've done the semi-finals and stuff, I haven't watched too much of it, to be completely
Put you
honest.
off?
Well, it's just I never know when anything's on. I don't know who's in the finals, and like a heap of the guys that race World Cups do Crankworks. I know a fair few of them now, but it got kind of, I don't know, kind of got confusing. I'd like see a live stream was on, so I'd watch it, and then it'd be like semis, and people would just be like kind of cruising down, and I never really knew what was going on.
Yeah, just confuse people to the point.
Yeah. What's your opinion on it?
Oh, I think it ruined it, man.
Yeah, right.
I really think it the vibe around World Cup racing just seems like it's taken a massive shift in the wrong direction, and they've tried to make it quote unquote more professional, and I think they've just turned people away. And I get that they're trying to change it, they're trying to reinvent certain things, but it just seems like it's been done in just not the right way.
Yeah.
And I was talking to people, even I didn't obviously do last year, but everyone just said the vibe in the pits around the track, it's just everything's just changed. Everyone's keeping it themselves. It's not it. It's not
Yeah, well,
it.
isn't there like a heap of team cuts and stuff this year too?
Massive, man.
'Cause I've heard that like a ton of the downhills are all coming to Crankworks,
Yeah, I think so, because it's just
and like none of them have rides and
I think
stuff.
just the time with like obviously when COVID happened, bike sales went crazy because everyone couldn't do anything besides go exercise by yourself. What are you going to do? You're going to buy a mountain bike.
Yeah.
So all the companies did over-ordered bikes, and then with everything, cost of living and everything that's happened after COVID, no one really has money to buy a $10,000 mountain bike. So all these bikes are sitting in containers around the world, not getting sold. All these companies are hemorrhaging money and not being able to put that back into race teams. It's like, why would we sponsor an athlete to sell bikes that we can't sell?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're just sitting there. So there's been massive cuts on teams. I'm pretty sure at the Enduros, man, like they're literally just cutting everyone pretty much. Like,
or even like didn't e-bike enduro completely gone?
probably. I don't
Like,
know.
or the World Series is,
I
because
think
I'm like
so.
good mates with Ryan Gilchrist,
Yeah.
and he's just going to normal enduro. I think there's only an e-bike world champs and nothing else.
Yeah. It's sad, man. It's sad to see it go this way because, like, yeah, it was such a booming, growing sport, and now I feel like it's just fallen off a cliff. And
Yeah.
I think, like, I'm going to say the organisers have some part to do with that, but I think just the bike industry in general is suffering right now. Just what I said, they run over-ordered bikes and kind of got stuck in this
Yeah,
shitty position. And also, man, even now I look at like all the kids these days, and if you can just buy like an electric like Suron or something, most kids just ride them.
Yeah.
So it's like there is a change in what kids want to do. And I look back at when I was growing up, if I could get an electric motorbike, probably would ride that more than, like, I ride e-bikes all the time now anyway, but like if you could actually get like an electric motorbike, I'd probably just ride that more. I don't know how much effort I'd put into riding downhill when you've got to sit in a car for 20 minutes to ride to the top of the hill and no one really maintains the tracks. And it's like, I get that there's so much other things that you can access now when it comes to riding that kids probably aren't as excited to ride downhill as they used to be. So that's in that progression of the sport, it could be a bit like it's lacking a little bit as well. So I think there's many factors, but from the outside looking in, I'm not that mad about stepping away when I did, because it all seems like it's kind of fallen to shit a little bit. So
Yeah.
that's one thing about, like, I miss it, but I'm also like, I miss what it was, not what it is now.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a part of my problem racing in Australia now too. Is like I go to events with like kids I coach and stuff, and I'm like, there's no hype around this sport right now. Like especially with BMX, I'm like, I really want to race. I'm like, but like the way racing was when I grew up was so much cooler than what it is now. And like, there'd be people lining the fences and stuff, and it's like no one, like what we were saying before, it's like no one actually thinks about what anyone's doing anymore. Like kids at the track barely even watch the pros race anymore. It's like they're off playing handball with their mates in the car park and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, when I was growing up, we were all hanging off the fence when the pros were on the track. And it's like now these kids can't even name who the pros are.
Just don't care.
And yeah, and I think it's the same thing. It's just like the industry's definitely changing, and I think there's a few BMX companies that have also done the overorder thing on bikes and dropped team like all their riders. And yeah, I'm not really sure what the go is with the industry, but
I was going to ask you, what do you think would be a way to revamp it?
I think I don't know about like downhill, but I think in BMX they need to make it more of a spectacle. I think downhill probably does a pretty good job of it. Like you guys get good crowds and stuff, but in BMX it's like they don't really put any hype around the pros, if that makes sense. And I feel like when I was growing up, putting hype around the pros made that a place I wanted to go. So it's like I would look at pros and they were under the lights, lots of commentary, sponsors, big prize money, all this stuff. So then it's like when I was 9, I was like, I want to be like these people. Whereas now there's not even like hype around the pros. So these kids don't even have like someone to look towards and be like, that's where I want to take my career. And then I feel like that's why half the BMXers all go to mountain biking or motocross, because like you go to Supercross and it is a spectacle. They do highlight Jet and Hunter and all these people. So it's like the kids growing up in the sport are like, I want to do what these people are doing, and I can also sit here and watch what they're doing so I can follow that path, which doesn't really happen in BMX.
Yeah, it's more of a future to go towards.
Yeah, exactly.
You hope it happens, man, but yeah, it's one of those things. It's just what direction will it go?
Yeah, and I hope it. I mean, it's one of them things too. I feel like it's been through this before. I feel like it does peak and valley a fair bit, the bike industry, and I'm sure it will return, or there'll be new organisers or something will happen, and then it'll probably fall off again at some point.
Just go up and down. Eh?
I feel like that's how it happens anyway. 'Cause even the motocross industry right now, like with KDM and Gas and all that, about to like shut doors or whatever.
Are they?
Yeah, they're like, I don't know. Don't quote me on this, but apparently, like, I heard the other day that they had like 9 days to find like $285 million, or they were Gas, Husqvarna, and KDM were like going under.
Really?
I was talking to one of my Supercross buddies the other day on the Sunshine Coast, and he rides for KDM, and he's like, I got no idea what's happening next year.
Yeah.
So like even motocross, which is huge. Well, we think it's huge. I actually seen a thing the other day. It was a video about Jet Lawrence, and it was talking about the sport and how he could change the sport and stuff. And they were saying that national spelling bees in the US do more numbers than Supercross.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not a big sport.
Not compared to what we think it is and
Yeah.
the money. And that comes back to anything, man. Like, I remember looking at downhill, like the UCI World Cup when I was coming up, and it seemed so professional. And we thought everyone made so much money. And then you kind of get into it and you're like, oh, there's like penny and dimes kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, compared to other professions. And if you're not top 10 in the world, like, you're not going to be getting paid that much. And that's a hard thing to fit into. But from the outside, you think, oh man, there's so much money. They got big trucks, blah, blah, blah. They're selling all these bikes. And you get into it and you're like, yeah, this is nowhere near as abundant as I thought it would be when it comes to money.
Yeah.
But you don't do it for the money, but it also would be nice after grinding at something for 10 years that you could make some good cash off it if you've actually made a name for yourself.
Yeah.
But it is still, like you say, a slog. But I guess when you look at motocross and all these other sports, you think it is more professional looking in, but then you kind of get into it and you're like, oh, no, man, it's still a battle.
Yeah, 100%. But it's like anything. I believe if you're good enough at anything, you should make a living off it. And I feel like there's a lot of sports that obviously do, but in the bike industry, it's a rough one.
It's hard, especially in Australia.
Yeah, and margins on bikes are a lot smaller than people think as well. So people like think that you sell a $10,000 bike and they're like, oh, this company makes heaps of money. But it's like when you start talking to like people that are high up in the companies and stuff, it's like you realize that they've got to sell a lot of bikes to make money. Like it's not.
And especially now, like we said, it's not people don't want to spend a lot of money at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's tricky.
Yeah, it's definitely quite the industry.
I was going to say, before we actually started chatting on the pod, I just want to ask you like what direction you wanted to take this. And it was funny because you're just like me. Every time I've done a podcast, mainly Gypsy Tale was a big one because it's action sports, but we never actually talked about mountain biking, which is funny because I said to you before, it's like you kind of get put into this loop of always talking about the same stuff and being in that same realm, which is great because obviously it's something you've done for so long and part of your identity. But you wanted to touch on something that happened to you and your family when, how old were you when this happened?
I think it was 2018. So I would have been, I don't know how old I am, 21. Yeah. I think I would have been 21, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to explain what happened and like how it affected you?
So basically my sister had a partner. So we were obviously close with their family. She had 2 kids with this partner, and his brother unfortunately got killed in a car accident. And then it was probably a year later, he was like obviously struggling a lot because him and his brother were super close, and unfortunately he took his own life, leaving behind like my sister, his family, and 2 kids, which were my nieces at the time. I think they were 1 and 3. So they were very young. This was also at the time where I was traveling a lot overseas with racing and stuff, so I wasn't home a lot, but it was a situation where I have my sister and 2 nieces, and I kind of took it upon myself I felt like I had to be the father figure to these girls, or at least the male in their life. And it was when I was traveling a lot, so I was like never really here, and it was something that I struggled with a fair bit, and I've never ever talked about this publicly. I think I talked about it once with my ex-girlfriend and how much I actually struggled with it because I'm not one that talks a whole lot. But yeah, so it was like something that I've struggled with a fair bit over the years. Like what we were talking about before with racing and being away a lot and traveling and stuff, it's like I don't get to see them a whole lot, and things like teaching them how to ride a bike or just anything that like a male kind of would do in a little girl's life is like I tried to take that responsibility, but then was also in a situation where I felt like I couldn't really take on that responsibility. Does that make sense?
Why do you think you couldn't take it on?
Well, I just think I didn't do a great job of taking it on while I was traveling a lot and like being away, and like I remember I don't know what country I was in. I was away somewhere when they were trying to learn to ride a bike, and my sister like rang me and asked me something about them learning to ride a bike. And it's like, I've also never said this, but I got off the phone to her that day and I remember it vividly, and I was like crying in my bedroom in wherever I was because I was like, I felt like I should be at home teaching them how to ride a bike, and I should be doing this job, and it's something that kind of just got thrown onto my sister to be everything in these girls' lives. And I wanted to help with that, and I felt like I almost resented racing for the aspect that it would pull me away from them. And I feel like that's why I never really did a great job of it. And I still sometimes feel like I'm not.
You didn't feel like you were present enough for them.
Yeah. But then it's also like trying to balance a fine line where even when I see them now, I don't feel present because I feel guilty for not doing enough for them or being enough for them.
But what's enough?
I don't know.
It's that metric that
Yeah,
it's got no ceiling.
exactly. And it's, yeah, I don't know. It kind of, this subject gets me touchy, but yeah, I don't know what enough is. It's just like, it's something I'm still trying to figure out every day when I see them, and it's also something I don't talk to anyone about. I like my girlfriend at the time, which was in 2018. Like, I talked to her about it, and then when we ended up splitting up, I never opened up to anyone else about it ever again, really. And then I did an interview in a magazine one time about it, but then during COVID, the magazine never actually came out. So I've never opened it up about it. And it's just something that I like deal with on a daily basis, that it's kind of like what we are talking about earlier about, like, you look at these people and you think that their lives are great and stuff. And I feel like in a sense, like, I portray this very stoked, happy, excited life on Instagram. And then it's like something like this that I deal with every day that no one has any idea about.
I heard this thing and it said suicide doesn't stop the pain, it just moves it on.
Yeah, right.
And I can see how I think just that line alone's probably pulled a lot of people back from the edge of whatever they're going through, because, like you said, it's like your sister's got to deal with that every day and you've got to deal with it. And I wonder how much your sister would be feeling a similar feeling of like, what's enough? And am I doing enough?
Yeah, and I've never really spoken to my other sister about it, and I'm sure she does deal with it, but my sister that lost him and myself, like, since then have, like, dealt with, like, pretty bad anxiety. Like, I've been to, like, doctors about it, like, kind of in quiet and secret, and that's just kind of how I operate for whatever reason, which I probably shouldn't, but, like, I know it's something that we both struggle with every day, and yeah, it is that question. It's like, what is enough? How do we? Because it's like, it's simple things like, she'll come home from school and she's been getting bullied. And then it's like, not that you can do anything, but it's like, for her to come home to a dad or something like that, like, that's probably somewhere where you come home and feel safe. And she goes, like, she'll go home, and obviously my sister's a great parent, but I think it's just, like, obviously hard on them. And then that's the role that I wanted to take on, but then I would always get sidetracked racing or whatever. And then I feel like the resentment would just circle of, like, I'd resent racing because I couldn't be there for them, but then I'd come home and I would almost resent myself for not being there for them. So then I would still pull back again instead of just going to see them and have fun and be with them, which is probably all they want.
That is all they want. That's all you'd probably want as well.
Yeah. And I think that's why I'm so stoked that, like, they want to try BMX, because I feel like that's somewhere we could, like, really, like, bond and
common ground.
Yeah, do something together that we both, well, I love, and they obviously want to try it, so hopefully they would love it. And then,
well, do you look at just this alone as momentum in that direction of not feeling like that? Because you obviously reached out and you said, like, I want to come on, I've got stuff to talk about. Like, there's a shift in momentum in that.
Yeah, I think so. And there was, like, I think just listening to you talk about some, like, stuff on a podcast I listened to one time as well, and you're obviously very articulated in the way that you were, like, talking about the way you would progress through retirement and your injury and all that stuff. And yeah, I think it's because it's something I really want to get better at and improve, and, like, obviously try be there for them more, be there for my sister more and all that stuff. But I think it's trying to obviously figure out and learn how to do that, and probably surrounding myself with better people and all that would help with that.
It starts with you, man. Like, it starts with you. Like, you've got to figure out what that voice is, like, why it's saying it's not enough or it is enough or whatever that is. Like, you need to figure out where that stems from and why that is determining how you show up with these girls. It's like you saying that I get anxious and pull away because I feel like I'm not there enough, and then it's like the the cure is almost the curse in a way. It's like doing the thing you know you need to do gives you the anxiety that makes you pull away from the thing you need to do. You got to go, okay, why am I getting anxious about that? And how do I drop that? And how do I just go and be present and be with these girls? And then, like you said, help them with BMX. And like they would cherish any time I think they'd have with you. And there shouldn't be a scale of if I hang out with them twice a week, that's okay. And if I hang out with them once a week, that's not enough. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
But I get it as well. And then it comes back to when I said, like, you got to fill up that pain bucket to become an athlete at the very highest level. And it's like being away from those girls, that's painful, man. It's sacrifice. And it's all these little things that I guess a lot of people miss when it comes to becoming an athlete or putting yourself first in the terms of going after what you want. Like there's things that suffer, like relationships suffer, friendships suffer. Like it's all a part of that. And it's figuring out, I guess, like you said, your why behind what you're doing and how you can balance all these other things that make up life into it. And if these girls are obviously such a big factor, like how do we put them into the mix and make it so it's like, okay, we can balance them in. And I don't feel guilty if I only see them however many times a week or a month or what it may be. And know when I do see them, though, I'm going to be so present and I'm going to give them everything I have to give them. And I'm going to leave that knowing that I'm doing the right thing and not feel guilty that it wasn't more than I've come up with in my head.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that is probably, like what you touched on there, is probably a huge issue I've had for like a long time with this situation, because I feel like I'm one of them people, for some reason, I'm like always trying to find the perfect answer for everything. Like when I was training, it'd be like, if doing 3 squats is better than 4, I'm doing 3 kind of thing. And it's like, I would always, it's like, I think Chris Williamson said it. He's like, your pursuit of perfection's killing you more than your imperfections. And I'm like, I'm bad for that. It's like, I'll spend hours trying to search for the perfect answer instead of just jumping in and figuring it out. And I think like what you're saying there about seeing them once a week or 3 times a week, it's like just seeing them should probably be enough. And then if I can see them multiple times a week, see them. And then if I can't, like obviously I can't, but it's like I need to probably, be better at just like when I am with them, be 100% with them so that every second counts. And then that will like make up for the time that I'm not with them.
Exactly. I came up with this thing, it's like paralyzed by perfection.
Yeah.
And you want it to be perfect. If it's not perfect, you don't do anything. You're stuck.
Yeah.
And I feel like you'd have a similar thing.
Well, I always say analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Same thing. Same. This isn't going to be perfect, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But it's like, nothing's ever going to be perfect, man. Like our idea of perfect. And then you get to that and it's like, oh, but it's better. It's that athlete mindset. It's so good, but it's also a son of a bitch when it comes to like just doing something.
Yeah.
Because you want to make it the best it can be, but it's like, it doesn't have to be the best or perfect. And it's like, what is perfect?
Yeah.
Perfect's always changing, man. It's forever changing. It's this mirage you're never going to catch, because you'll reach your level of what you think is perfect. And then you win a race. Oh, but I could win by more.
Yeah.
Or you meet a girl. Oh, maybe like she could go to the gym more, or I could train more, so I'm a better, like, you know what, it's always altering and shifting. But if you live your life not diving into something because you think it could be better, you're just not going to do anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I heard a thing and it was like, someone was talking about like, they were like, throw your backpack. And it was like, if you were like running home from school or something and you had to climb a big fence, if you throw your backpack over, you've got to get over the fence kind of thing. And like, I don't know why, but that like resonated with me a lot. And I think that's something that I need to like lean into more, because it's like I'm always trying to have everything mapped out before I jump into something, including helping these girls do whatever in life or be there for my sister and stuff like that. And it's like, if I just did something, it would lead on to something else and something else and something else. But I think I'm, paralyzed by perfection in the sense that I'll just like stay away a bit until I know the answer of what I should be doing.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be too late.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at your coaching, man. You can go into your coaching with a perfect plan.
Yeah.
And look where that went.
Yeah. And that is a prime example, because people ask me all the time, they're like, how did you like build what you've built? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I just, one day at a time, I just had clients, took on more, changed things.
Yeah.
Built the clothing brand around the coaching and kind of thing, and it all just intertwined. But yeah, that is a great example. I've just never taken a step back and looked at it like that.
Yeah. Just little steps.
Yeah.
Little steps in the right direction, you get pretty far pretty quick.
What was your like first podcast like?
I forgot to press record.
Perfect.
Sat down, I was on a laptop with a shitty microphone. I was with Brooke McDonald and Charlie Harrison, and I didn't press record.
Yeah, right. How long did you record for?
45
Well,
minutes to an hour.
Pretend record for?
Yeah. And to say that didn't hurt, I'm like, I'm gonna start doing a podcast. Can't even record the first episode. A lot of doubt, a lot of self-doubt. I was almost to the point where I'm like, this isn't for me.
Yeah, right.
And
Off of the one
podcast. And then the next one, I was talking to Sven, Martin, and Boris, and like, yeah, we'll do one with you. And I did one with them, and it was like, I sucked it. Like, I haven't listened back to it. It'd be interesting to listen back, but it was good because those guys can speak quite well, and they've been in that world of interviewing other people, so it's just a very open discussion. But I look back and how quickly it seemed to pick up momentum and how people enjoyed it, because it was a little bit different. Not many people, especially in that mountain bike realm, were doing podcasts, and especially someone at the time, like I was getting top 10s pretty consistently and talking to other top riders. It's just a different perspective on how to, like, if a top athlete talks to another top athlete, they will understand what that person is going through on a deeper level than a journalist. So I gave people a different perspective on asking Brooke, like, how he's feeling going in, and I can actually resonate with what he's saying, and he can probably feel a certain level of like safety and calm in that, because I'm not trying to like pry at him, or I actually have felt what you're talking about. I've been in it with you, like you kind of in the mud together, more or less. So I think people really enjoyed that aspect of it, and I do miss that because I haven't really done someone that races mountain bikes or have been in that mountain biking or bike world for a while, but there's definitely a certain level of relatability that I think you can bring, and anyone listening to that probably enjoys that, because you end up as more of a fly on the wall to a conversation than to like a press conference or somewhere where it's like
question answer.
Yeah, it's more relatable. So I think, and the feedback I got when I started was definitely reassuring to like, okay, like let's keep doing this. And yeah, it definitely grew quite quickly, and then even inspiring people like Andrew Neathling told me he started a podcast because I did one with him and Elliot Jackson. I think it was like my third or fourth episode, and he was like, well, if Dean's doing a podcast and he's still racing, I can do one. And I think it definitely motivated a few other people to kind of put more effort into media and kind of growing the sport in that way. But yeah, I like to inspire people by doing just different things and doing me. Like I remember that year I was traveling a lot by myself and doing the podcast. It was just like, this is kind of cool. Like that's, like I always tell people, step outside of what you think the norm is and change it, and put your own bit of, I guess, flavor onto whatever it is that you're doing, and look at how something can be done. It doesn't necessarily have to be better, but just your way. Like in, for example, in 2021, I never understood why world champs bikes were always just green and gold. And I was like, true Australia, I think, is like Aboriginal culture. So I was like, let's get Aboriginal art and put it onto a bike and a jersey, because I'm like, no, I haven't seen that before. I'm like, that's my true Australia, so let's do that. And I did that for 2021 and 2022. And then you look at now, all the Australian world champs jerseys have Aboriginal art on them. And I was like, sweet. Doing that inspired someone to see that and then do more. And it's like, that to me, that is really cool. Just like something that you think is cool, probably other people think it as well, but you've got to kind of put yourself out there and take that little bit of a risk that isn't the norm. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But it's like, if you're being you, like if you're really being the true you, it shouldn't really matter how people respond to that. It should just be like, this is what I think is cool. I'm going to put it out there. If no one likes it, who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. It's like you put a piece of art up on the wall. It's like you don't sit back and wait for people to like it or give you like praise. You just like, that is a cool bit of art. I'm going to put it here and people can just enjoy it. It's like we live in this culture now where everything has to have a feedback loop of whether it's good or bad, and then we make decisions off of that. Where it's like, if you're just putting out good stuff to the world, like that feeling of putting that out there, like you come back to when you're racing, like that feeling of racing at that highest level, like chase those feelings. Like those feelings are what you should chase, not what people think about what you're doing or how people view your art or view what this is. It's like, that doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't. It's like, I'm doing this thing and it makes me feel like this. Let's keep doing that for as long as we can, because that's where, like, that's what life's about. It's creating a certain feeling. And if you find something that you can put that kind of energy into that creates it, double down on that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great way to look at it, because it is very true, and I still find myself doing it every day. Like even certain things I post on Instagram, I'll post because I'm like, this will be received well by my followers, not this is what I want to put up. And it's like, because it's like, it'll just be like a sponsor post in a certain brand. And I'm like, I'll put this photo at the start of the carousel because I know people like that style of photo. And it's like, but I don't want to put that up there. And I think that's, I've definitely been better at that now as well. Like I'll just post whatever I think's cool or whatever I want. But I definitely went through periods where it was like, it was almost just chasing validation that people would think you were cool. And it's the same thing. It's like, I guarantee the people that like my photos or like your photos don't even remember what we posted yesterday. They just
Well, do you
scrolled,
remember what
clicked.
you liked yesterday?
Nah. And it's like, so it's like you're almost dictating what you do in the world based on that. And then, yeah, it's like they don't even take any notice. They got no idea what you did.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. And then I think that changing my perspective on that could change a lot of my life.
It's up to you.
It is.
I got 3 questions I always ask these at the end of the pod. First one is, you go back and give yourself some advice. What would that advice be?
Don't take life too seriously because at the end of the day, nothing really matters.
People are just going to forget.
That's what I would tell myself when I was young, because there was a lot of great experiences and stuff that I had racing and all that, or traveling the world with my family to races. And I feel like I didn't enjoy them the way I should have, or been present in them, because I was overstressed about racing. And then it's like, I've learned over the years that even stressing about racing isn't going to enhance your results. It's like, it almost just makes it worse. It improves your chances of doing bad with all the extra stress and how tight you're getting at. So I think just don't take it too seriously, because I've just, learned that none of it really matters. And whether you're serious or just having fun, half the time you do better having fun anyway.
Stressing doesn't help at all.
Yeah.
What are you scared of?
Not being enough. Probably just from the conversation, what we were saying before. And I think a lot of it stems from my sisters and my nieces. But I think it leaks into other areas of my life, whether it's coaching, or there's a lot of times where I'll go to coaching sometimes and I'll explain something to someone, and then I'll literally like think into my own head and I'll be like, do I actually know what I'm talking about? Like, should they trust me? Because of just comments people have made in the past, or people trying to like put me down years ago, that things have just like stuck. And sometimes I'll just like doubt myself, or doubt that I actually know what I'm doing. And then we'll do like a great session, or the kids will get great results, or like kids I coach will get PBs consistently week after week. And I'll like look at that and I'll be like, okay, maybe it is enough, or maybe I do know what I'm talking about. But I think that's definitely a fear I deal with daily.
Comes back to that self-doubt kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting, man. Everyone goes through it. It's just how much you go through it, I guess, and how much do you kind of like quiet that voice down.
Yeah, for sure.
And the last one, when you are dead and gone, how do you want to be remembered?
Oh, that's good. Probably as someone that was, I don't know how to word it. I want to be remembered as someone that was willing and able to help a lot of people, if that makes sense. I think that's just what I love about life, is I love being able to give to people. I love being able to help people achieve what they want to achieve. So I would like to be remembered as someone that did that to as many people as I could, whether it's 1 or 1,000 or more. I would just like to be remembered as someone that gave as much as he could to people and helped them.
Yeah, I love that. Sick, brother. Well, I appreciate the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Easy as, man. I was going to say, what, do you have anything you want to plug or put out there? You said you got your clothing brand and your coaching. Like, do you want to just like say what's going on with all that stuff?
Yeah. But yeah, I just do coaching. I can't really plug it. It's kind of sold out.
People want it more now, man.
Yeah, I do online coaching, but I'm booked in person that. But then I have a clothing store. It's called CW Bike AU. Or you can just follow it on Instagram. The links are on there.
Yeah, I'll throw some links in the description and stuff. But
yeah, cool. All the links will be below. And then if you want to keep up to date, I do YouTube pretty frequently. It's just Jayce Cunning, just my name, or just follow me on Instagram. But yeah,
sick. Appreciate it,
just
bro.
riding bikes.
Just having fun, run bikes.
That's it. Trying to keep it simple.
No self-doubt.
No, not anymore.
We'll cancel it out. Cheers, brother.
Awesome. Thank you.
I appreciate it.